Good morning. You're listening to Drinking Socially, the official Untappd podcast.
Your weekly look into what's happening in the Untappd community and the world of beer.
I'm John, and we're really excited this week to drink some beers from a local bottle shop that we were able to pick these things up. They're brand new, available in our home state here. And I'll be the first to admit I am always excited to try a new beer, and even more excited when it's one that none of my friends have checked into yet. So we're really pumped about the beers this week and other things.
Yes, and I'm Harrison, and I'm feeling a little funky this week. It could have been the P-Funk I was jamming out to in the car this morning, but there's also something in the air that smells a little barn-like. What do barns and awesome funk music have in common? Maybe not much, but there are more than one kind of funk out there. So we're going to get to more of that in a minute. But first, Drinking Socially is released every other Wednesday morning and can be found at podcast.untappd.com.
Or wherever you listen to podcasts most often. iTunes.
Sure, wherever.
For beer this week, we're going to jump right into it, and I'm going to admit that I poured these ahead of time because this was a traditional bottle with a cork inside of it.
Right, there's some labor involved.
So we did the manual labor ahead,
right.
So we've got
that.
a beautiful beer sitting in this Untappd glassware. We're going to begin this week with Black Project's Tagboard blend.
Right.
This is a 2018 blend. I know that Harrison is well researched on this particular beer and even was doing some research into the method. This is an exciting, it's as much of a science project as it is a beer.
Yeah.
Those of you that are savvy enough to pull it up on Untappd yourself. It's the first time I've seen Black Project available outside of Denver. And I've seen it now available at a couple of places in North Carolina.
Yeah.
Salute, you've heard us talk about them before if you're in Charlotte. I've seen it in New York City, getting some check-in tags, likely on a couple of verified venue locations. These guys are pretty good at what they do based on what I've seen, not just in Untappd reviews, but in write-ups. Black Project is one of those, they're kind of becoming maybe not Russian River, but, they're starting to build that sort of lore for themselves.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And, coming right from their website, just if you guys have never had Black Project before, it says every Black Project beer is fermented with microbes captured from the local environment via a cool ship or foraged from nature, and they're in Denver. That's where they're located. We believe this creates a beer that is unrivaled in complexity. Our beers are intended to have a sense of place or terroir, which we can talk about. No matter how hard one tried to, our beer cannot be replicated outside of our brewery. In fact, our microbe cultures are purposefully allowed to evolve from batch to batch, creating variations and interesting twists from different releases of the same beer. So this is really cool and gets into some super old school brewing techniques, which we'll go through today, that were really kind of founded in Belgium, which is one of the most unique places in the world that beer has ever been made. And a lot of that has to do with the yeast that's there and why that yeast is there. And we can kind of talk about that as we go through this beer. But this beer is classified as an American Wild Ale. It's got like 5.5 ABV. 25 IBUs, and kind of diving into the actual beer itself. Their official description is a blend of lambic-inspired cool ship spontaneous beer, brewed in accordance with the method traditionnel, which we'll talk about. Guidelines: aged for 1, 2, and 3 years in neutral oak, then combined with freshly picked Neo-Mexicanas wet hops, which is cool, from Voss Farms in Arvada, Colorado. And they further age the beer for 2 weeks on more than 20 pounds of hops in each freshly emptied red wine oak barrel these guys are living in. And it says it's a slightly sour and funky base beer, mellows of sweet pine, melon, and berry characteristics from the hops. And the wild microbes like ours are known to be able to kind of biotransform the hop aroma compounds and flavor compounds. And goes on to just talk about how cool and unique it is. Which let's just drink this thing.
Cheers! I've been waiting. Harrison
right?
just dropped more information on me than a pile of books. Let's get into this thing.
Ooh. Whoa. That is so tart.
Wow, it keeps going.
It does. It really does.
It's a sweet tart. It's different than a sweet tart. It's not. It's a beer.
And then it finishes that like kind of barnyardy, funky hay thing. Man.
Oh wow.
Yep. There's
I've never even attempted to brew anything on this scale in my garage. Most of the time, they're just sad failures. But this, I don't know how you would produce. One thing I want to ask about. I've seen this cool ship, and aside from being just like a really cool flying machine where you can have your friends, is that is it just like a fancy wort cooler? What's so special about this cool ship that I see referenced on usually just an expensive beer?
Right. So traditionally, again, cool ships were used in Belgium, and more specifically Brussels. We should get specific with this. So these kind of lambic-inspired beers, or a traditional lambic, has to be made within 15 kilometers, I think, of Brussels, in the Pajottenland Valley or the Seine River Valley.
Champagne thing.
So right, yeah, it's super specific to that area, and I think there are, as of today, only like 12 breweries in that area that are making actual lambic beer. But yes, like good comparison is like champagne. Lambics can only be made there. You can have lambic style beers or lambic inspired, as they're mentioning in this description. But to be an actual lambic, you have to be in Brussels and in the Seine River Valley. And the Seine River goes through Brussels, and obviously is surrounded by a valley. And that's a big reason why the traditional lambics are really sought after and really unique, and that like those yeasts that are there in that valley, basically the story is that they've been trapped there forever and are kind of mutating with themselves and unique to that part of the world because they have never left or haven't left in thousands of years. And so when you're making beer with them, you can't, if you, just like these guys have done, opened up your windows in Denver and made a beer and let the yeast there that's just in the air jump into your cool ship, which is what has happened here. Even if you have like the same exact ingredients as a beer, the same beer brewed in Brussels, they just taste slightly different. Same if it was like in New York City or, in Melbourne or anywhere. That's the point of all this stuff. And what the Black Project talks about, the terroir, just like, grapes. So you can have a Pinot Noir from Argentina and California and Spain, and they're all different tasting, the grape is the same because the ground is different. The soil, the moisture that year, the moisture all the time based on where they are. So there's all the kinds of components that go into making that grape what it is. Where the beer, it's all about that wild yeast that exists just in the air. And there have been, I think, upwards of like 120 or something different kinds of yeast that have been. And wild, and not just yeast, also just bacteria, just bugs. Not all of this stuff is actually yeast. And some of it's just bacteria that, like lactobacillus. That's the most common kind of, I guess that is kind of a wild yeast that's in the world. That's what makes kind of a lot of cheese is cheese. But in these lambics in and around Brussels, so they're all over the place. They're always different. There are some common ones, and like a lot of, but this is not like the Saccharomyces, the Cerevisiae, which is the one that most ale yeast is made out of. These are all the other, Brettanomyces is in here probably, and it tastes like it. Lactobacillus, all kinds of stuff. But there are, so, and I don't know if Black Project, they probably don't, they may not publicly say like what they are getting in their beers. They probably know. They're probably doing cultures of it and looking at it under microscopes and identifying the stuff they have. But like they said, it's different each beer to beer, different times a year. That's a really cool thing. So the cool ship, to answer your question, is how you cool this down. Yeah, exactly right. After you brew it, you send it in basically like a pool. And for this style of beer, the windows should be open to the outside world, so the yeast gets in there and it cools naturally. The reason you put it in a pool is there's more surface area than if it was like in a smaller container, so it can cool through ambient the ambient air temperature faster than if it was in like a vat or a closed fermenter or something. And then traditionally we just left it cool overnight and then racked into barrels the next day, and the fermentation began with all those bugs that landed in the cool ship that evening. So it'd sit there for like 12 hours or so and then get put in some barrels, and those barrels usually have bugs in it too, and they do more stuff. And yeah, it's all changing, all evolving. And but again, a big reason why Belgian beers are so sought after and so unique, and they're considered a world, heritage site and all this cool stuff, because they're just extremely unique to that part of the world. And the big reason for that is the valley that all those yeasts are basically just trapped in, only escaping now in beer bottles as they're shipped all over the world. But yeah. So right, it's like the Great Escape. It's a long, long Great Escape movie. But anyway, this one's cool. So this is like Denver, the wild, microbes of Denver we're tasting right now, which also obviously are actually a pretty big mountain range. So I imagine if he was brewing, on one side of the mountain or the other, the same beer also tastes different. But I've heard of breweries like capturing, a lot of them, that's a thing now, is to go forage for stuff. So you go find like some wild blueberries and you scrape the wild yeast that's on them off, and you culture that and put it in a beer. And some of it tastes good garbage, a lot of it tastes really good. But yeah, you're going to only do that at a certain time of year when it's actually cold enough outside to have this be effective. They say like it's looked down upon. The term is like summer beers or summer taste is what they, like the traditional lambic brewers would say if you made one too early in the year, because it'll still cool down. But I guess when it's that warm out at night, still it produces like even more actually of the tart flavor we're getting that comes from it being not as cool, so not cooling down as quickly, or one of the ways you can get it if you're doing just spontaneous fermentation. But it's really cool, and Black Project's their website's really nice, and they talk about this stuff, and they're very open about how it's just a big experiment. And obviously, they have by now figured out what works and what doesn't, and I'm sure have a nice standard operating procedure. But at the end of the day, it does come down to what the yeast want to do, and if they're happy or not, if we actually make that beer for you, or if it's going to be funky or in a non-enjoyable way. But this is great, and it's just like super tart.
I'm loving all this. I feel like I just got a little bit more educated on, and one of the, if I can distill some of that into information that I want to hold on to, just for me personally, Black Project produced this particular beer, and even if I had every ingredient and the same equipment and the same method, even if I brewed this beer myself with Harrison's help on the roof at Untappd, and we opened up our cool ship, which is just so much fun to say, we'd end up with a product that could be tasted differently. Which is infatuate, and that's where the lambic kind of decree is coming from. We're saying that like Cantillon, one of those breweries that everybody knows and loves, they're within that region where they can officially produce a lambic. And Three Fontaine and some of the others that have this lore about them. Some of that is because they're within the region of these wonderful flying bugs and yeast.
Yep. Yeah, there was a royal decree in 1965 by the Belgian government that said, among other things, that in order to have a lambic called a lambic, it must be a minimum 30% unmalted wheat, use aged hops, employ spontaneous fermentation, and be brewed within 50 kilometers of Brussels in the Seine River Valley. So it kind of covered some of that stuff. But again, so these guys, the Black Project's not claiming to be like a lambic brewery. They're doing their own thing. They are inspired by a lot of it. But one of the cool things they've done differently here is they're in this beer, as far as I can tell from the descriptions, they're not using aged hops. They said wet hops, like freshly picked Neo-Mexicanus hops, which is going to obviously give it totally different flavor profile than aged hops, which really are only being put in lambics to impart like no bitterness or flavor, but used as a preservative property. So they're not going bad on them. But they're, cool, really, really cool stories. I was reading one about like the lambic cellars. It's probably the same today, where obviously all this beer, sometimes they can be fruited, sometimes they're not. This one has no fruit in it. They're drinking tonight, this wild ale. But back to lambics traditional, they, when they're fermenting a beer, it's, obviously lets off a lot of gas, which is just CO2, but that can carry all like the sweeter aromas of the fermentation out and attract fruit flies. So if you go in like a real lambic cellar, it's going to be covered in spider webs because the brewers would put spiders down there to kill all the flies. They wouldn't get in the beer. So you walk down there, and just don't go down there and be like, hey man, let me clear this web out of the way. Like it'd be like, yeah, walking into a brewery and kicking the brewery cat out of the door. Like it's there for a reason to kind of clean up the pests and everything. But that's a really cool, but that's, you're inoculating this beer with bugs, and you're also putting spiders in the base of the predator from other actual bugs. There's all kinds of collaborations happening here that really is, at the end of the day, like as you learn more and more about it, the brewer and the blender and the person who made the beer has like less and less importance to do with it as long as you follow your 5 steps.
Good spiders.
Right. If you have good spiders.
Mouse keeps things away from your grain. Spiders keep things away from your...
Right.
In the story that you're painting for me, it's like, it reminds me of my Italian grandmother. And it seems like one of the most natural. And of course we know you can't get a pale ale on the shelf in every state and follow this formula.
Right.
Which is, I think, in this regard, just a testament to the craft that's going into a beer like this.
Sure.
I feel bad in that I haven't even really addressed how amazing this particular beer is tasting.
We're letting it open up and it's just rocking right now.
And I won't have the words or the palate to give you a right experience on what this beer tastes like to me, but as it's sitting in the glass, I know I've seen Harrison take a couple of sips, and it's incredible. This is the drawback of a podcast, is that you can't see Harrison's face as he takes another sip of this. But even, the olfactory, when you smell this beer, whether you're a beer judge or it's the first beer you've ever had, just the smell.
Right.
Is going to do something to you when that opens up, whether it's in a plastic cup or the perfect glass.
I know.
Just,
It does have that like horsey barnyard smell a little bit. It's not overpowering. The nose is really subtle, and I get it's basically like bite into a ripe lemon, like hard, like really, because that first sip was so tart.
Pucker. Yeah.
It was like I was puckered. It kept going, which is great. Like woke me right up. And then you get a little bit of I got a little bit of like the melon, just like slight little melon note. And that's the hops that they've added that are kind of dancing around with this micro blend we got going on here. Man, oh man. There's definitely, actually I'm getting a lot more melony, like stone fruit stuff now. But it has at least a note of like just lemon peel, lemon rind, face of a lemon, like a lemon, what are those? Lemon drop candy?
Lemon drop candy.
Kinda lemon, like that.
Nope, not lemon balm. Like lemon, nope, that's going the other direction. My Italian grandma's still in there. This beer, in an effort to try and, I think Harris and I would both easily admit that we love food and beer. I think everyone has to love food. Beer's an option, but... I think this beer would lend itself incredibly well to, for me, I jump to, your typical fruit. Give me like a stone fruit. I'd love to have a bite of peach or plums. Now, I don't want to go right to lemon with this, but I think fruit would really help balance the tart pucker that this is giving me, kind of cleanse my palate and let me go back to some like fresh off the vine fruit. I'd also be happy to see some incredibly stinky blue cheese to go right to with this.
Or even just a brie, like a triple cream brie that's like really smooth, to just kind of like cut this up a little bit. Because it is, but that's so like they're doing a great job of like because you can, like off flavors with wild ales are like, it tastes like vinegar, or it's like really acidic, like it almost hurts to drink. Things like that like can happen. None of that is happening here. It like runs right up to the line. That first sip was like, whoa, but it was very enjoyable. There was nothing about it that was like astringent at all. It was just like, whoo, this is going to take me for a trip. Now it's just mellowing out to this like little punch bowl thing that still has. I want to get in their lab and see what these things are, what they're catching out there. But but this is definitely like throwback to like what a lot of beer used to taste like forever before there were like laboratory conditions and things were quality controlled, and you get wild beer and a pint of British bitter. They probably throw it out, but like maybe not noticed right away for a couple days.
Maybe there wasn't a market for it.
Right.
Now it's cost $1 extra for a pint if you do it right.
Exactly.
I think this would qualify for I would put this right into the sour beer category of simplifying it, right? It's got a funk to it. Mm-hmm. It's what is this, 3 years to get here?
Yes, so that's a cool thing too. So we'll talk about that, and that's very common to like when you do a blend of beers to have it be a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year blend, and there's actually a specific. So the method traditionnel, which we mentioned about. That is kind of what it's built upon, that royal decree from 1965, and is more modernized, I guess. There were some issues in the past of certain breweries claiming they were brewing lambic beers, and they technically weren't. And the kind of discussion opened up of what should be, what you need to have happen to be considered a lambic. And this organization that I think they just call themselves Method Traditionnel, or that's what they're known as. You can go to methodtraditionel.org, and we'll have that.
We'll link it in the notes.
Yeah.
Yep, it'll be
we'll
easier.
have that. But they have two kind of standards, and one of them is just the Method Traditionnel, and the other one is Method Traditionnel 3 year, which kind of talks about this, where it's what that means to blend, and that's what a Goza was or is supposed to be a blend of more than one lambic. And so, like, that's where, like, the blenders come in. We're like, and this is, the brewery I worked at we did blend beers. We had a really big barrel program, and I assisted the barrel master for a while, which just means we would walk around to the barrels, take samples out of it, and see when they were ready. And that's basically, which sounds just like you're drinking on the job, which the job is drinking. So that is what happened a lot of the time.
You have to be good at this,
right? It was basically like every Wednesday, him and I would go into the cellar and be like, all right, we think these 12 may be ready. Let's pull some samples, bring them out. Let's taste them, talk about it. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. And so a blender would do that, would go to different wine barrels that are full of beer now and pull a little bit out and be like, all right, this one tastes ready. This one's too young still. This one's still got some of that summer taste or whatever it is. And maybe we need 80% from this barrel and 20% from this one and 50% from this one. And then you blend that all together and you have a beer. But that is like an art form in of itself. And so a lot of that, this is a blend. This is a blend of three different beers that I believe they blended and then aged on the hops, if I remember correctly. But yeah, so that's another, even like the next level of this Method Traditionnel is talking about how to handle 3 year blends and the difference between that and just doing the Method Traditionnel and stuff. So it's a really cool website, but it's traditionally if you're in Belgium, if you're in Brussels and around Brussels in the Center of Valley, a blend like this is a goose, but we're not there, so wouldn't be considered that. In the Method Traditionnel, the 3 year one, it says it has to be a blend of unfruited beers. It may contain up to 60% of the 1 year old beer and has to contain at least 10% of the 1 year, 2 year, and 3 year old beers. And they talk about how the years are actually based on the summer. So they would say it's like, this one is 1 summer old or 2 summers old or 3 summers old, and that's equal to 1, 2, or 3 years. The actual average age of the final blend has to be at least 18 months old. So again, it's kind of up to the blender beyond that, like which ones taste like they go well together. But that's what you're doing, is blending a bunch of beer, and then in this case, you would condition it warm and bottle condition this thing. You're not like forced carbonating this at all. You're putting in some priming sugar in the bottle or some fresh wort or something, and letting it sit for, I think they say, at least 4 months too, which is also a requirement. There are lots of requirements. If you're familiar with like the German purity laws, it's very straightforward. This is like multiple parts and sections. There's a lot to go through. Check it out if you want. We're not going to run through the whole thing today, but again, Black Project is not claiming to be a lambic or making gozes, but they are inspired by it. It's hard not to be. And this is a 3-year blend that they have mixed up themselves. So that means they went to the cellar and put around with some beers and made a really cool sampling of it. And we would do that too. We also had fooders that we would fill with like base table sour beers and blend barrel stuff that was in barrels into our like house sour beer, house wild ale, which was awesome to do. And I did a fair amount of that towards the end. It's a lot of work. Like working with barrels is a pain in the behind, and filling bottles, gravity filling bottles is really annoying. And then you got to sit and wait. You make like a lot of times you keg a beer, you can a beer, you pull off the line, you drink it, and you're like, it's that instant satisfaction. This is like, we're going to put it in this bottle, and we're going to put it in this room, and you got to forget about it for 2 months. And then you're like, all right. And then you're going to label it.
I'm out of beer. Not that that's a huge issue. We don't have to address that publicly. This went down really well. 5.5%, had more flavor than it deserved. But one thing that last bit that you were sharing with us, Harrison, as a brewer, I guess as a guy that used to brew often, I'm going to defer to you on this. And there isn't a right or wrong answer, but if I was looking to open a brewery tomorrow, I love this beer. I love the history, the JR and the Tolkien that comes with this beer.
Yeah.
What would be your MO? Is this something that has to be passion driven? Is there a better profit margin on pouring 3 years into a bottle and doing so much extra work that comes into it? Is it a difference of local raised pork chops versus Costco
store bought?
Sorry, Costco. What's the what would compel you to say this is the type of brewery that I'm going to open versus an easy to attain and just cranking out some great pale ales? You know, what's the difference there?
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely a labor of love, and it's not like we're kind of, if you're reading between the lines or just listening, like clearly this kind of beer takes a long time, a 3-year blend, and you got to sit on it for months after you blend it, and there's lots of transferring from different barrels and fermenters and lots of places things can go wrong. And yeah, it's a lot of work for, if your margins are right, you're doing okay, but yes, like the profits will be much better on a pint of IPA, even if it's like double or triple dry hop, just because the amount of time it takes you're investing in just waiting on in the space it takes to have a bunch of barrels. So, I mean, if this is I would not want to be my first brewery, be a spontaneously fermented wild ale brewery, because also, so much can go wrong, and the return is not going to be, you open a brewery and then 3 years later get to pour your first beer. So it's definitely, it's
that's a business plan I can get behind.
So when logistically you might have a tough time finding someone to back that, but what a lot of breweries do is have this as part of their, they have plenty of core beers and beers that are green or clear, like fresh beers, inoculated beers that, like IPAs and pale ales and stouts and lagers and stuff. And then every once in a while they release a cool bottle of beer that is, something like this. And that's what we did at Chamonix Creek, because we obviously had tons of other styles, but had a whole section of the brewery that had 3 fooders in it, and I think about 400 barrels of either spirits or wine, and that was full of beer all the time. So, and we released something like every month, I believe, to our bottle club. But it takes the most work. It's super frustrating. Lots of things go wrong. Lots of points in making this beer where something could happen. And then also you have to kind of wait. There's a great story that's known in the Philly beer world. I won't name the brewery, but it's a Pennsylvania brewery where basically he made, I think it was just like a Brett beer. It wasn't even that too crazy. He made a wild ale, bottled it, sat on it, opened up a bottle of it like 6 months later, didn't like it, waited a year and a half, opened up again, didn't like it, thought it was gross, waited another year, opened a bottle of it, kind of tasted okay, waited another 6 months, opened up another bottle of it, and he was like, oh, this tastes awesome. But like 3 years since he made the beer, and he's like, I love this. He submitted to the Great American Beer Festival, and he won gold for American Wild Ale. And it tasted like garbage the first time I had it, and it turned into this amazing magical thing. So I just didn't do anything. I just let it alone. Again, that's not a business plan that you could sell to any bank about like something may work out well. But again, the rewards are great. But this is yes, it's very very involved. You're not going to be able to make a beer in 16 days like you could for an IPA. This is going to take you a while. But again, if that's what you want to do, don't let me stop you. Go do it. And
Please, the beer tastes really good.
Right. Go show up at some brewery that's doing this and knock on the door and shovel their grain and clean their tanks and listen to what they got to say and do that for a bit and then go do it.
Black Project located in Denver, Colorado.
Right, go knock on.
I don't know if they're accepting shovel positions right now, but again, this beer we've been drinking and honestly waxing poetic about the method as well. Tagboard from Black Project, named after, I guess, Black Project. I guess it makes you think of Call of Duty and secret government ops. And,
exactly.
And this Tagboard is actually pulled from recently declassified information. Was a code name given to, I'm paraphrasing here, but project code name that involved recon drones taking photographs deep inside enemy territory.
Yep.
Which, I don't know if this beer relates to enemy territory photographs, but honestly, I think it's really cool to have, they put so much time into the beer and then into the story behind it as well. Tagboard hasn't been checked in 400 times. This is the 2018 release. They did one for 2017. This variant hasn't been checked in 400 times yet, but Black Project doing pretty well. They get a little over 1,000 check-ins month over month, with some recent activity on their feed from 6 minutes ago at the time we're putting this together. Patrick checked into Microdot from Black Project saying that this is my last check-in from an awesome experience at Black Project, a must check out if you ever visit Denver. Patrick was definitely checking into a few different beers from Black Project. Or you got Bob, who was drinking it out of a bottle in Greenville, North Carolina, and phrases it maybe perfectly just with one word: delicious! Exclamation point.
Boom.
So cheers to both of you guys. Keep checking in your beers, sharing with us your thoughts and opinions, and hopefully your friends on Untappd as well.
Yeah, absolutely. This is great. Very cool. I think we have another beer. Surprise, surprise. So this next one is from American Solera out of, I think, Tulsa, Oklahoma. It is their Endicott Estate Blend. Listed as a farmhouse ale, 6% aged on local blueberries. So we're going to switch it up a bit, put some fruit in this. Ooh, it pours a nice kind of, what is that, like a pinkish purple kind of?
I'm gonna give you that, Harrison. Yeah, that is it's a pinkish purple.
Sure.
That's got to be a Crayola color.
Right, or something like that. It's very nice and cloudy looking, but not just kind of, as most of these beers are. You're not filtering this, obviously, ever.
Much different coloration on this one.
Pink, looks like a rosé.
Smells fruity. Still got a little bit of funk to it.
Nice carbonation, too, but man, our palate.
Wow.
Yeah, it's good.
Oh, wow. We got a different thing going on here.
Yep. Woo! Yep. The fruit's in the building. Look out.
6% ABV.
Mm-hmm.
Farmhouse ale aged in oak barrels. We already covered that.
You know what? That's really good. There's a different, tons of blueberry right at the end, like a fresh tartar blueberry, where you kind of, tart is not the leading descriptor I would use in this one. I can't put the words. Let me have another sip.
This one, as soon as I'm drinking it pretty much right out of the bottle here. It hasn't sat for very long, but as soon as it hits my mouth, it's like it's the carbonation increases, right? And it almost foams a little bit extra as I get a taste of it. Initially, it goes from funk,
right,
to I get, there's the farmhouse base of this beer, which you can find in there. But almost as soon as you swallow, as soon as it leaves your mouth is when I'm met with maybe just like in my taste. I'm not accusing Endicott of providing bad blueberries, but as it leaves my mouth, I'm met with a blueberry that I picked maybe 2 days too early and just decided to eat anyways. Like that, almost a little bit green in the berry.
Yeah. It's almost like a red grape flavor from it too, like all those darker fruits. It's definitely like in the front. It's like this. It's like a.
So, just some background, not nearly as much on this one, but American Solera. They're about a 2-year-old brewery out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Lots of check-ins for them. They've just, in my experience, recently been available in North Carolina, where I bought this bottle. You'll find them there in Denver as well. The Whale, again, the Whale has these guys on their shelf as well.
Yeah, they're killing it.
But this particular beer, the Endicott Estate Blend, I believe this is the second year they've done this. Somebody closer to Tulsa can probably correct me on here, but the Endicott Estate for American Solera is just a local blueberry farm, which is going to explain the additions in this beer. It's listed as having local blackberries and blueberries, and Endicott Farm actually just closed their blueberry season a couple of weeks ago. But I think this is really cool to see. Again, it's a brewery. We're working with a local farm. We got the blueberries from there. I say we just because this is a really good beer and I want to be included. But this beer reads so different than the last one we had.
Sure. Yeah, it definitely does. And I was going to say is fruit in a beer. This is, again, so many things we could talk about in a whole podcast, but from the description, the blackberries and blueberries are in the barrels, which is great. And that's where we're getting a lot of the flavor from. But you can put them in fermenters. You can brew with them, like actually put them in the boil. For this one, though, as it's written, it sounds like they just made a farmhouse ale, and then that was their base beer, and then put it on top of the blackberries and blueberries, which is probably why there's so much color in it. It wasn't like boiled off in the boil or anything like that, and or the flavor is so profound. It's like added towards the end of, or as late as you could, unless you put it in the bottle. Late as you could is put in the barrels, which is great.
I wanted to ask about that from a can I say layman's perspective. So dry hopping we've talked about a lot with IPAs. Is this sort of the equivalent of dry berrying?
It'd be wet, probably
totally
wet,
different end result, but
sure. We would do. I remember I spent a whole day packing. I think it was 60 pounds of peaches per barrel for probably like 20 or 30 barrels for a beer we were making that was going to go almost right into them after we ferment actually in the barrels, which we usually would do primary fermentation in a stainless steel fermenter and then secondary, like this, aged stuff in barrels. It's just way easier to manage. You don't want to be shooting like 212 degree wort into a wooden barrel. It may not take that very well,
depending on how you're
right. So anyway, but yeah, and yep, you just put it in there, and again, it's at this point, we used the word a couple times tonight and talked about it a bit. This, this beer is called Endicott Estate Blend, blenders, blendery. It's like that's another subsection, part of the beer world where you're not a brewer, you're a blender. So the beer has been made and it's sitting in a barrel, and now it's your job to decide, first of all, how much fruit to put in that barrel if you're going to fruit it, and then as it sits down there, is it good after 6 months, after 12 months? Is it good after 8 months?
That's the tasting part, right?
You just go in there and you taste it. And the way you do that, it's traditionally is you fill the barrel up and you put a bung on the top of it so that it kind of allows some CO2 to escape if putting that beer on the berries does some secondary fermentation, which it probably will. It'll probably kick up some of that yeast and the new sugar of the fruit being added to it and re-ferment a bit in the barrel, which is what you want to happen. And then, so you put a bung in there to let that stuff escape, but not let anything enter the barrel. There's kind of one way, like breathers you put on the top of these things, little plastic bungs that only let CO2 out but nothing in. And then you take a nail and you hammer it into the front of the barrel as it's sitting on the rack, into the actual barrel itself until into the beer, and you let that sit there, and you just pull the nail out with the a pair of pliers or whatever, and the beer kind of shoots out a little stream, and you catch it in a cup, and then you shoot it with sanitizer and you hammer it back in. And so you do that, and we're talking like samples in like an ounce or two of it. Like we're not pulling much out of a sometimes probably 100+ gallon barrel. So that's what you're doing, but that's how we taste it. We go through there and kind of pull stuff off and taste a little bit. And so that's the barrel master or the blenders or jobs to go through in there and see, all right, this stuff's great. But it starts with how much you put in, and that's really like to taste and that trial and error or what other places have done. But that's why a lot of places say like, aged on 20 pounds of hops or 40 pounds of blueberries or 2 pounds per barrel or all that stuff, because they've measured it out and seen what works and what doesn't. But yeah, that's how you do it. Just pop it in there and put the beer on it. You usually sanitize so you could sanitize the berries with like, potassium metabisulfite, which is what they use in wineries to sanitize the grapes. So it's like a food grade sanitizer that you dust all the grapes with, and it kills all the bugs on top of the grapes, and then put it in your wine. But most breweries don't do that. They're kind of like, hey, especially if you're kind of cultivating our local blackberries, let those bugs live.
True, keep it going.
Dump the beer on there and see what they do inside that barrel. So you don't really need to sanitize it, and you would hope that, especially if it's already fermented a bit, the good stuff will outcompete the bad stuff. But again, it is a experiment, and that is again why you're tasting it. And there are other signs you can look for in these beers on the top of the barrel that to if it's doing well or not. But a lot of these beers will protect themselves by creating what's called I'm going to say this wrong, a pellicule, I think, or something like that. Anyway, it's basically like a force field on top of the beer that looks gross when you look at it. Kind of looks like a crepe across the entire thing. It looks like a film that you think when looking at it might mean the beer has gone bad, but it's actually pellicule. Anyway,
I wish I was good enough
to
help out with that. But crepes are delicious.
Yeah, I'm sure. Good, John. I'm sure someone will correct me or whatever. But it was maybe I'm saying it right. But yeah. So there's these beers. Kind of again, it's like you're revealing more and more behind the curtain that the brewer's job is to really just get it to the yeast or get it to the barrel, and then make sure that everything's happy and the temperature's right and all that stuff, because the bugs are going to do what they're going to do, and that's what gives you the end product, really.
So go ahead and Google image search beer pellicule.
Careful. It looks weird.
Pellicule is described as a gooey, slimy, bubbly, fuzzy layer of nastiness that may appear on the surface of beers fermented with Brett lacto, pediococcus. Mm-hmm. It's a type of biofilm in which a colony of microbes huddle together and float like a raft on the surface of certain kinds of beer.
Right.
That's the beginning of a children's story, really.
Yeah, sure.
James and the Giant Pedicle.
Right. I can't believe that someone's going to, once every week, John, we create some great thing. That's it. Lastly, it was pop-up buffets for something, buffet, the buffet market, which is in need of a renaissance. Buffets have gone by the wayside, much to my chagrin. But now this week, children's books. Just reach out to us, or our publicists, for the rights to that. James the Giant Pellicle.
There's something to be a peach beer. I really want to, like, the one thing I'm learning and speaking with you about, I love to drink sour, wild, fermented beers. The flavors that come from them, I think, are amazing. From a culinary background, hearing your story about the peaches and chopping them and throwing them in a wooden barrel, preferably with a knife I found in the woods.
Sure.
That's so against the rules.
Right.
From my background, where you'd sanitize the peeler almost in between each peach sometimes. Yep. I think that's it's exciting that art like that can exist in the world.
Sure. Yeah, it is. But again, you have to. But again, that's the risk you take there. Is it may just be not good, or it may not re-ferment. It may just sit there in the barrels. You may have to dump it because it just didn't do anything. It just wasn't happy. So, and there's all kinds of like, oh my gosh, I could go on this for days. Lore about like, so obviously you have barrels and they're stacked on racks in a brewery, and they'll have some barrel guys be like, that barrel that's in the corner that the skylight hits the light on it, that one's always horrible, or that one's always the best, or the one in the bottom right nearest the heater is always going to be a little more funky than all the other ones. Like there's all this kind of, superstition that can go along with it too, where even the placement of the barrel in the cellar, maybe there's a sweet spot there.
The ghost of James and the Giant
Pellicle, right? Wandering about, exactly, giving and taking.
Playing a little bit of George Clinton next to the better barrels.
Exactly. That's what we do. We played actually a lot of heavy metal. It was a lot of heavy metal. It was mostly
I think that's how many of you guys and girls listening to this podcast are brewers? I know we always ask for feedback on the Facebook group. One thing I'd like to propose is let us know what music is your beer listening to. Yeah. I know there's a couple breweries that will actually label it on the can. There's one in Cary, North Carolina that I was privileged enough to drop in. Mm-hmm. Every beer is brewed with Wu-Tang.
Oh.
Which,
sure.
Wu-Tang is going to be a great start.
I heard about this. I think there was a brewery in West Philly that did that too for just one beer, and they had one of the members of Wu-Tang help make it, and they just blasted it during the entire fermentation process. So Wu-Tang making beers all over the place.
Sometimes I don't even know it other than the Spotify listen download.
I was on the brew team on Halloween once, and they played Monster Mash as I was mashing in, which is cute and funny. And then someone just played it every time I mashed in for like the next week and a half. And I was like, this joke needs to end.
I kind of feel like that should happen all the time.
It's not usually unless I would request like Iron Maiden or something, because a lot of times I get it at like 6 a.m. and be like mashing in right away, which is, we did not have any, our brew house was 30 years old when we got it. So there's no fancy, a lot of these breweries have like rakes and stuff now in them where you press a button and it spins the mash around for you, and you sit there painting your toenails or whatever. We did not have that luxury. We had a huge wooden mash paddle that we just manually mash everything. We just stir up the mash and all the grain and water and stuff. And I remember we made a quad, which turned out to be like an 11% beer, Belgian quadruple, as a collaboration with Against the Grain once. And it was, usually the mash takes you like, it takes 20 minutes to mash in or so, and you're like working out the whole time, just sweating over hot, 160-degree water, and it's morning, and you're stirring this, 1,000 pounds of grain, and basically just making a big oatmeal. And that beer took an hour and a half to mash in because it filled it to the top just because it was so much grain. So we did. We had to. It was a shift change. And it was literally like, hey man, I was supposed to leave here half an hour ago, and I'm mashing in your beer. You need to come here and finish this. So one person we brewed that beer twice back to back to do a double batch of it, and one guy got lucky. The first dude did it in the morning. It was not me, luckily, and he had the whole entire thing to himself. But we had to switch it up because it was such a long brew day because it was such a long mash, and obviously it's step one basically. And if that gets delayed, everything else does. So anyway, what were we talking about? What was that?
So
James the Giant Pellicle.
So these beers are working.
Sure.
And we've gotten some amazing stories out of Harrison so far, just getting through the beer. Believe it or not, we've got some other things we're going to cover.
That's right.
So finishing up here, we're talking about American Solero's Endicott Estate Blend, blackberries and blueberries. This beer also about 400 check-ins on Untappd. So while everybody loves to drink those hard-to-find beers, we're also here, Harrison and I both entertain and would love to get some beers from the other areas of the world, really. Croatia, you're making some outstanding beers. Sweden, Norway, Denmark, of course, Germany, Belgium, we've referenced, France, Italy. I can't think of a country without thinking of at least 2 or 3 beers that are made there that make me want to visit.
Sure.
So, of course, we don't fully intend on drinking just amazing beers. We just got really lucky this week, and it brought us some great stories from Harrison.
Sure. Oh, yeah. And I want to make one more comment. I'm trying the whole time I'm drinking this beer, I've been trying to pick a flavor out of it. I think I'm getting it from just the oak barrels, but there's almost like like a nutmeg spiciness to this.
I was just going to say, as it's warmed up, I get almost cinnamon in there.
Exactly. And it's got to be from the wood. But I had it at first, it was like giving me pumpkin beer vibes. And I was like, what are you thinking, you idiot? And I was like, wait a second. This is aged in wood. That can often impart kind of similar spicy, or, like spice characteristics, not spicy, but spice characteristics to it. I think that's it. Also could be the yeast doing magical stuff, but I got that right away. Also, this is amazing mouthfeel. It's like, that's a great thing you get from a naturally carbonated beer too, is like, it just feels different when you drink it. It's much like velvety smooth, but it's not a nitro. It's, it's just natural carbonation. Again, it's a lot of work to make beers like this, but they are really, really good in a very unique way, a different kind of really, really good that you don't see every day.
So cheers.
Yeah.
And my God, this beer is a different beer in the glass than it was when we first poured it. It's warmed up entirely as I finished my last sip. I know. It's become a beer that I want to drink over a Christmas holiday.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Moving through the beers, of course, if you've had these, add Harrison and I as a friend on Untappd right now.
That's right.
I have no friends that have checked into either of these beers. Same. So I love being the first one. But share your check-ins with us. Let us know what you think about them. Let us know what your favorite beers are. That's how we learn about some of these amazing gems here. You're welcome to reach out, tag us, ask us questions. Look for us on the Untappd social media, or join the Facebook group. It's Drinking Socially. It's a private group on Facebook. Harrison and I will let you in right away.
Oh, yeah.
And there's always some good questions, topics being discussed on there. Most of us just love to talk about beer.
Yeah, it's a fun community. It's very active. So get in there. If you got more questions, that's the place for them.
Speaking of talking about beer, Harrison's got a kind of a focus story for us with some of his history and kind of story of the week that we've been going through here. So, Harrison, I'm going to sit back. This is my favorite part of the podcast. I'm going to put my feet up. I'm going to listen to more stories about beer. But we're transitioning into what's a great summer beer, right?
Exactly, right. I mean, that's what we're going to shift gears hard now and go from wild, spontaneously fermented beer to talk about the other light beer, the summer beer, the beer that I would drink all year, but it's an awesome option for the summer, that being a Kolsch. So if you don't know, a quick history about Kolsch, originally from Cologne, Germany. In about 1603, they kind of rebelled against the rest of Germany in a way. There was obviously it was tested lager style brewing, and they actually made it a law in Cologne that only top fermenting or ale yeast, so the opposite of a lager yeast, which is bottom fermenting, can be used in their beers. And the thought was, they don't really know, there's not like great documentation about why, other than perhaps hunting for a little more flavor than a traditional kind of crisp and clean lager provided. Quickly, top fermenting yeast are all the ale yeast out there. So your IP, everything, which is most commercially made beers, so like ales, but also stouts, porters, Kolsch. They're like usually finish fruitier and are more ester driven, and they ferment a lot faster, and they ferment at warmer temperatures. And the warmer temperature actually contributes to them fermenting a little bit faster. So there's a little bit of a yin and yang there. Whereas bottom fermenting are for lagers. They ferment slower and produce much more kind of crisp and clean flavors as opposed to the ales, and they work better at lower temperatures. Now, cool thing about Kolsch's is that they will ferment at ale temps, like above 62 degrees, but they also work well at lager temperatures. A lot of the Kolsch yeasts out there, and you can lager a Kolsch to help just kind of clean it up naturally. And that's so lager is just German for age, to age. And they would do that to help clear up the beer, make it like literally clear to look through. And that just took time for the sediment and particulate to kind of just through gravity drop out of the beer. And you do that by aging it or lagering it. But it's common to lager a Kolsch today. Now, characteristics from the BJCP, which is the Beer Judge Certification Panel, which is really kind of like the standard of what the Brewer Association uses as well for kind of their standards, or there's some crossover there for describing all the styles of beer out there. Appearance of a Kolsch should be very pale to gold to light gold, very clear, and delicate white head that may not persist, so it can kind of be like a quickly dissipating head. Aroma-wise, low to very low malt aroma, kind of like a grainy sweet character. Perhaps some subtle fruit aroma from the fermentation. Maybe think like apple, cherry, or pear notes. I get a lot of pear notes in the Kolsches that I really enjoy, but they're not always there. And it's not always not a requirement. Low floral, spicy herbal aroma is optional, but not really, not a style. And then some of these yeasts, and I have this experience, give off like a slightly winey or sulfury characteristic. And I believe the White Labs yeast kind of puts that, as it ferments, it blows out. It just smells like, like a witch just exploded. It's very, very sulfury.
Of course, we've all been there,
right? But it goes away. Like it's good to get it out of the beer then and let it, disappear, because you don't want to be drinking that really. Or I don't prefer it in there. But yeah, overall, kind of fairly subtle fruit character, really clean, really fresh beer. And then for the taste, similar. You're smelling kind of what you're tasting anyway. Some pretty sweetness sometimes, medium to low bitterness, delicate dryness, but also very crisp. Mouthfeels, medium to medium, light-bodied. And they're going to have high carbonation too, which adds to, it can help sometimes accentuate that fruity hop character if you carbonate stuff more, things like that. Ones I love, Gaffel Kolsch is obviously like one of the most famous ones. Reichdorf Kolsch. There are lots of those are from Germany, from the Cologne region, both I believe. But a lot of great ones made, all over the place. And this is unlike the Lambics. You can technically brew a Kolsch anywhere. There is no law that says you can't call your Kolsch a Kolsch if it's brewed in Milwaukee. You can do that. Food pairings, which we're going to start doing more for these stories and stuff. I actually recommend German sausages, not surprising. Also bacon and eggs. Yes, this is your kegs and eggs beer. It can work just as well. It is really a lot of the ABVs and these things are around 4 or 5%. They're low alcohol. Also recommending shellfish and spicy cheeses, which again I always find that if you got a really nice clean beer, put something up against it that's a little bit different and spicy. Anything but cheese, why not? Oh, it's a good way to go. But this is kind of like my go-to beer. And any given night, you can look at my check-in activity. I usually have 1 or 2 IPAs and then a Gaffel Kolsch or something like that. I'll just cut it up a little bit.
Clean, right, it really does. Give your palate a break.
And they just started Gaffel Kolsch. This is becoming an ad for Gaffel Kolsch. They just started canning their Kolsch for the first time, which is awesome. 16 ounce or
accessible.
500 mil cans. But yeah, and that's just awesome. That is every time what the doctor ordered. So, but I love this style. It's a nice alternative. It is more flavorful than a lot of lagers, if you're looking for that. Very similar to Helles lagers, though. If you like that style too, you'll probably love Kolsch's. Might be maybe slightly lighter in mouthfeel and stuff like that, but very similar. But it's just a nice alternative that you can lager, but you also don't need to. You can clear it out, and from brew day to finish in 16, 21 days, you're home brewing and be good to go. But as it sits in your keg there, it's going to clear up and really clear out and crisp up over time too. So you're not worrying about the hop character disappearing like you would in a pale ale or IPA. This one, the crispness will remain. It doesn't need to be very hoppy.
In this beer, I think it doesn't. This is a great example of how you can have a beautiful, accessible, repeatable beer. It's not all the rage. It's not super trendy. It's not as exciting as a wild fermented 3-year blended with French and American oak barrels. And those are super exciting beers, but it's hard to find them, to drink them all the time. And this is something that in my background or experience, this would often serve as a great entry level beer. Instead of recommending a Pilsner, which sometimes can be too hoppy or too bitter for an initial drinker. Pilsner sounds easy, but it isn't.
Sometimes it's not. American style Pilsners will knock you down.
A blonde ale, A Blondale's, I think, a great entry level or just end of your day beer.
Sure.
But a Kolsch, I have so many good memories of just explaining to people the lore behind the Kolsch and its creation in Germany. And now it's a style that you'll see American craft brewers kind of replicating, and you'll see more often than just a brewery from Germany, where now you can have your own sort of local Kolsch. And the flavors that it bring. I think Harrison, you nailed it. The mouthfeel, the flavor. This is something that would pair incredibly well with almost any lunch you could imagine.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, and they have their own cool glass too, which is like a straight cylinder glass that they recommend enjoying it in. And this is actually a really big style in like the southeastern U.S. Like the first time I saw it somewhere was in outside of Philly, was in Charleston, and like every brewery in Charleston brews one, and almost every brewery in the town that we're in Wilmington brews one as well.
That's true.
And you see it, it's a kind of right, and it makes sense because it offers the similar flavor profile of a lighter lager that's an approachable beer, but it's not going to take you a month to make. Like when you're looking as a brewery and you got only a certain amount of tank space, you got to move stuff along, but you need a light beer. Boom, Kolsch.
Great flagship.
And it's great down in the southeast U.S. because it's hot a lot of the time. And this is easier to make beer. I mean, it'll move quickly through your cellar and be ready to package much faster than a lager would. That's great on a hot day just to down quickly. So being at the 31st of July in the summer right now, it's if you're looking to switch it up a little bit and need a new lawnmower beer, grab a Kolsch. There are plenty of them in cans out there, even the traditional ones now. And check it out. Give it a shot. It goes well with grass clippings. It smells probably like it accentuates.
Actually, it's probably one of the BJCP aroma acceptable aromas. Grass clippings.
Grass clippings. So if you're trimming the hedges, just grab a Kolsch and trim away.
Now I want to get distracted and talk about a brewery in the southeast that makes a beer. St. Arnold makes a beer out of Texas, and it's not called grass clippings, but my head goes there.
Something like that.
You're right, something like that.
Probably.
Speaking of grass clippings,
yes,
and
John.
Special Kolsch glassware, and things that you would maybe show off after you're done mowing the lawn.
Yeah.
We at the Untappd store have a slew of things which you can purchase for yourself. I don't think we have anything that'll get you through mowing the lawn. No, we do.
Yeah.
Harrison, you're wearing one. It's this beautiful Untappd hat.
Oh, yeah.
Of course you have to keep the sun out of your eyes. You want your lawn lines to be incredibly straight.
Exactly. It's the pride of the neighborhood. Yep, that's right. I take a lot of time with my lawn lines.
The kids know when Harrison puts his Untappd hat on, it's time to break out the Kolsch glass.
It's time.
Fill it up. Don't let them drink more than one, or the lines will be crooked.
Yep, just leave me alone.
If you find yourself wanting to mow your own lawn in a really unique and clever way while the sun's out, or just show off your love of your favorite social media beer app, make sure you head over to store.untappd.com or click the link in the show notes. Find some cool things that you like for yourself, for your friends, for your next bottle share, for a housewarming gift, for a baby shower, maybe.
Why not?
Everyone's going to have to mow the lawn at one point in their life. You should feel and look cool while you're doing it. And save some money. Use the coupon code at checkout. Use the code PODCAST.
Oh,
that's going to give you 20% off everything you order. That's a pretty decent 20% off. I would mow your lawn.
Sure, you say right. You pay the money you save. You pay the kid next door to mow the lawn. You just drink the beer and wear the hat.
Well done, Harrison.
Now
Thanks for saving me on that.
Now you're thinking.
Use coupon code podcast. Pay the neighbor kid to mow your lawn and enjoy your sweat-free Untappd hat. Or check it out. There's some really cool stuff on there. We're actually doing a reshoot of some of the photos to give you a better idea of how beautiful they can look.
That's right. It's been fun. All right. So it's that time again. John's got some cool stories from the Drinking Socially Facebook group. A lot of neat stuff in here this week. John, what do we got?
Well, so I love it. We've gotten, I think every day I'm adding more and more people to the group. I love hearing your stories. One thing we ask when you're joining the group is to share with us your first beer.
Hashtag my first beer.
We've gotten some great stories talking about, I think one time it was optionally sharing a beer that your father shared with you, and another story was actually just taking a beer from your father.
Sure, a lot of those.
We've heard stories about warm beers. We don't. I haven't seen any stories come through about my first beer was a New England IPA. I suppose where I'm
20 years from now,
it's going to take some time.
Be. Right, I thought it was juice on the counter, and I've been drinking beer for years, thinking it was my juice.
Not Sunny D. But it's great to see people kind of meet in between episodes. The group's been incredibly active. Harrison and I try and get on there and submit feedback as often as possible. A couple of my favorites from the last week or so. We've seen Jamie actually suggesting a story for Harrison to pick up, talk about the origins of the New England IPA scene, referencing Lawson's, Alchemist, Maine.
Scandalous.
Sure. I know Harrison talks about this sometimes at random. But great feedback, Jamie. Those are certainly, I think
we'll get there.
The social media, the Facebook group, we get a lot of ideas about what we're going to talk about on there, just seeing what people are talking about in the group.
Yeah.
Mark, I'm going to shout out Mark Dembski because this is amazing. Mark was posting, he's planning a honeymoon trip with his soon-to-be wife. So congratulations, Mark.
Congratulations.
And future Mrs. Dembski.
Yeah.
They're taking a tour. They were going to be stopping in San Francisco. And hopefully, Mark, you're as lucky as I am that your new wife is going to be excited. You got some there are people talking about bottle shops, breweries, places to visit. And that's one of the things we love to see on the group. Share your own love of beer with a stranger. Add them on Untappd. Now they're a friend, and you guys can make each other jealous across the country about beers that you can and can't get.
Yep.
Lastly, very recent post on there, Jonathan announced his first brewery check-in. His first, this is hard to say without reading it. So there is a brewery called The Brewery.
Yep.
And they make some really good beer, and Jonathan shared his first brewery check-in. It was a beer called Coconut Macaroons. I did not prepare Harrison at all for this, but I'm going to say that my pick, if you're hunting for brewery beers now, you should look for one that I would pronounce as horchata.
Right.
It's spelled or XATA.
Right.
So depending on how Mayan you want to go, I pronounce it as horchata. It tastes like Cinnamon Toast Crunch milk. It's amazing. My wife picks on me about it. My friends pick on me about it. I don't care. I love that beer. I have cans and a bottle of it I'm sitting on because it's one of those beers that I go to after a rough day. It's sweet, delicious. The brewery makes, I think sometimes they would have been a good bakery as well.
Oh, yeah.
With some of the ingredients they put in their beers. They've had some amazingly high ABVs. Harrison, off the top of your head, your favorite brewery beer or anything that Jonathan should look for next?
Well, yeah, they don't make it anymore. I just looked it up, trying to remember what it was called. The Two Turtle Doves. They did like a 12 Days or Years of Christmas series. I guess it was a while ago. It's a Belgian strong dark ale, and it was amazing. That whole series...
8 Maize of Milking.
Right.
Yep.
What was the other? I'm trying to... I had a couple out of that series, if not almost all of them, and really enjoyed them. And then Autumn Maple that comes out every year is like one of the best pumpkin beers. That was one that we had almost every year at Thanksgiving. I've had a tough time finding it the past couple of years, but now that it's back in my mind, maybe I'll remember it in a couple of months and grab it again, because I love a big old Belgian quad or a triple or something crazy for Thanksgiving.
That's what Thanksgiving's for.
Right? It really is. Yeah. That and then I can watch Die Hard 2 right after we get done and really kick off the holiday season. Right.
We hope that you guys will learn Harrison's holiday season is deep seated in weird,
70s
I guess,
and 80s
popular
action
movies.
Sure, from the 70s and 80s.
Movies,
exactly
high
right.
ABV beers, couches.
That's right. It's a lot. That's where I'm the happiest. I'm belly full of turkey and stuffing, and just yelling with Bruce Willis at the enemies of freedom, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. All this stuff, he's protecting us all the time. Yeah, that's but Autumn Maple, that's a great one. Yeah, the horchata.
They make white chocolate too.
They
don't
do.
They?
Yeah. Now I could talk about them all day. And they're a really cool brewery. So I talked to them. Oh, that's the other one. The Nine Ladies Dancing. Oh my God.
They did like a Tuesday and a Wednesday.
Yep. Let me remember. There was one more that I had. Oh, the Rugbord, like their rye beer. That's really good. Anyway, we're off. But they were a really interesting brewery in that they opened up and were so busy so fast, ran out of beer and had to close for like 6 months. Because again, we talked about a lot of the beers they make are like big beers, Belgian, like barrel aged beers. They're not made in like a couple of days. They ran out of it like hard and had to close for like half a year and then reopen up again. And he's like the story that a lot of breweries, as they open up here, as a cautionary tale of like, you don't want to be too big, but you don't want to be too small, because if you're the place that doesn't have any beer anymore in town, that's a rough racket to get off your coattails.
Now you're just a bar.
You're just out of
Hopefully.
Beer, or if you're lucky. But they obviously recovered from that, and that was fine. But that is how their brewery story began. Was they were so popular they couldn't make beer fast enough, which obviously is a good problem to have. But that's all been sorted out. That's many years ago, and I'm just running through. Fourth Meal, that's another cool one. We should try and grab some of these things, John. And Midnight Autumn Maple. What is that? There's a variation of Autumn Maple. John, son of a gun.
So, Jonathan, thanks so much for sending Harrison and I out to the bottle shop again.
Exactly right. Supporting local business from far away.
Speaking of far away, one I just saw, and I got to share this because Ben left a comment on there. He's listening to the podcast out in Australia. He's coming to America soon, and he was asking for some beer recommendations. Honestly, Ben, bring some of the Australian crafts with you, because we don't get much of it over here. Little Creatures, right? I've heard of them. Two Birds, I'm familiar with them. Every time I try and get my hands on any Australian craft, it ends up magically lost in customs. There's a customs agent who is drinking the good stuff.
Probably on Untappd. We can probably find him. TSA guy 55 for coming for you.
But on my end, that's a quick recap on what you're missing out if you're not part of the Facebook group. Add to the group again, accepting. We just talk about beer. Great place to ask for advice or ask for new things that we're doing here. Harrison and I try and put this together. And honestly, it's for you guys. We have a lot of fun doing it, but of course, it's great to know that you guys are getting something out of it as well.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And a lot of fun putting all this stuff together and hearing from everybody, and looking forward to keeping it all rolling, keeping it all going. All right, guys. Well, thanks again for hanging out with us this week. As always, the show notes for more detail will be available at podcast.untappd.com. And if you have any questions or feedback, connect with Untappd on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, or directly at facebook.com, with us directly at facebook.com/socially.
Other than that, guys, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Cheers.